Member for Mildura.
Thank you, Acting Speaker. And I'm happy to rise to speak on the local government amendment bill today concerning governance and integrity, and it's an area that I think I'd, well, hopefully know a thing or two about. Like many others in this place, I was a councillor, a councillor and a mayor. Heaven forbid. And I did take great interest when the member for Bentley was talking about being elected to his local Glen Ira council, I think it was, at the age of 19. The last thing on my mind, I think, was local government at the age of 19. I had a few other things on my mind, I think. But you know, it's amazing to think that there are young people, we don't need to worry about like what, but it's amazing to think that there are young people, and I've been speaking over the last few months with young people that are really considering running in this year's local government elections, which is fantastic to see young people so engaged and happy to work for their communities. So the Leader of the Nationals obviously has introduced a recent amendment that I'll get to a little bit further down the track, but he made some good points during his contributions. And I will speak based on the knowledge that I know intimately, which is rural and regional councils. And councillors, I think, in the region sometimes feel as though their roles can be decorative at times, and they are very much led by officers, by CEOs. That was never the case when I was a councillor, but it has been the feedback of some. And, you know, when they try to have a say on things or question certain things, particularly with relation to budgets or modelling and how they've arrived at different models and you know, the different differential rates, particularly in the agriculture sector, and paying special interest to the difference between solar farms, for example, as opposed to broadacre farming, as opposed to irrigated horticulture, I know some councillors have had quite a bit of difficulty drilling down into the technicalities and the specifics of those. Other councillors, like the Leader of the Nationals said earlier, that have an abundance of experience, particularly in engineering, feel like their expertise, and a lot of these have come from the private sector, their level of expertise, and it might be, you know, water runoff on the side of roads that are dirt connector roads or just gravel roads, giving advice on that they know that they've done themselves on how to alleviate the pressure that comes with after heavy rains. And we haven't had a heavy rain this autumn. We are desperate for some in the northwest of the state. So if everyone could send their thoughts and prayers to the northwest for some rain, that'd be greatly appreciated. But they also feel like they don't get to have their say with regards to those sorts of operational things. And that's what the Leader of the Nationals, member for Murray Plains, was getting at. They don't feel like they can have as much say as they should have, given that they are elected representatives. And that sort of experience and that sort of lived experience and professional experience is largely why they were elected there in the first place. And while we talk about governance and integrity, and we hear some horror stories, and there has been some contributions today. In fact, the member for Shepparton was talking about Moira Shire Council and what's happened there. I have an experience locally, our councils, and I have 4 different councils in my electorate, given the large geographic state, and there is a monitor at Bullock, but that's largely, I think, because the sustainability of these rural councils is really undefined. They're not sustainable the way that they're structured with such huge geographic areas and a low ratepayer base. It becomes really hard to provide the, you know, roads, rates and rubbish. To provide those services becomes really hard under a rate capping environment with extra waste levies and things like that. So monitors are often needed. But as far as integrity of councillors, I've experienced some bad behaviour and disrespect, as I'm sure anyone in that, you know, it gets heated and people have differing views and all of that kind of stuff. But, you know, at the end of the day, elected representative to elected representative, for the most part, is fantastic. Sometimes I think maybe politics gets in the way, which it shouldn't. You know, we should maintain professional relationships Regardless of all of that, we are there for the same reason, to work for our communities. So, you know, when you turn up to a public event, an acknowledgement that your local federal and state politicians are there is nice and probably noted. The public don't appreciate it when those sorts of petty things creep in. In other instances, with my former experience on council, there was a couple of, there was mansplaining, I suppose, which is interesting, but that's kind of as far as that went. But a lot of the disrespect, we've heard lots of talk about respect amongst councillors and colleagues and outside of that, which is what this will extend to. And that largely came from, and I hate saying it, but that largely came from other female councillors from most of the time, which is, you know, so hopefully that this sort of governance and integrity bill and the amendment to the Local Government Act 2020 will help to address that. But it's largely something that I didn't experience. I know that there are councillors that will breach the code from time to time and, you know, show disrespect to fellow councillors. And I know there are a couple of mayors at the moment that are having an interesting time with managing the behaviour of some councillors, and it is always going to be a challenge. And when we talk about training, the training that I had to go through was minimal. I mean, if it was, I sort of had a little bit of knowledge of what I was getting myself into, otherwise why would you put your hand up? But I think the training, and the Leader of the Nationals made a good point earlier that, you know, you can be RPL'd if you're doing a Cert 3 or a Cert 4 for any prior experience. You get that recognition of prior learning. Well, maybe the training does need to be a bit more flexible. When there's changes in legislation, like we're seeing here, or a brand new act like the Local Government Act 2020, then yes, it needs to be very comprehensive and cover everything. But if a councillor's been there for 20 years, should they run again? I don't know. But there needs to be a bit more flexibility in the needs, and someone that is perhaps younger, less experienced, maybe that needs to be more involved, more comprehensive with regard to appropriate behaviour. And if I've heard a couple of comments that have been made throughout contributions this afternoon that if you know, some bad behaviour hasn't been recognised by some councillors to be unacceptable, that's a larger society problem, I think. There's a real issue there if they don't recognise that bad behaviour is bad behaviour, and that shouldn't be accepted on any level, I shouldn't think. So the recent amendment that the Leader of the Nationals put forward, that the bill be withdrawn and redrafted, particularly to provide procedural fairness by way of appropriate appeal mechanism for councillors subjected to suspension. The training also probably needs to be considered, and a lot more flexibility allowed with that. But with the four local governments that are in the Mildura electorate, and they are Yarra Yambiak, Bullock, Mildura and the Swan Hill Rural City Council, I managed to maintain, we all have a great working relationship. The mayors and councillors all seem to work, I don't know about internal workings, but when addressing me, it's all very respectful, and I'm very grateful for that. Having said that, we do get the odd call or email to the office about council. And this is the thing, though, when it comes with cost shifting and the state government often will shift to local government and local government will get the blame. The waste levy comes to mind straight away. Obviously, that is something that will come across my desk, and happy to chat to people. But also, if it is planning issues that council have resolved, not in their favour, I do always say there are council elections coming up this year, and I urge everyone to get involved, be engaged with what's going on in all levels of government. Then you'll know, because it does affect, whether it's directly or indirectly, all levels of government affect our daily lives, and I would encourage everyone coming up to the 2024 local government elections to give it due consideration. Things are a lot easier now with things like Teams and Zoom meetings and things like that. There's far less travel in those rural areas, so I'd encourage everyone to give it some thought. Yeah.